It's Tuesday morning, the weather's beautiful here, and it's a brand new year. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Let's officially welcome you to 2019. Thank you so very much for patronizing us in the outgone year. And you can be sure that we're committed to serve you even better in the new year. So it's decision year for Nigeria. Nigerians are trooping out to the poll in less than 2 months to elect not only Mr. President, of course, members of the National Assembly, governors and members of houses of assembly across the Federation. You cannot afford to sit on the fence or stand aloof this time. As a matter of fact, they say the number of people who did not vote in 2015 outweighs significantly the total number of votes we had in that election. And that seemed to have been a recurring decima in elections in this part of the world. And it becomes even more difficult to manipulate election if all of us will go out and vote. So you and I have a responsibility, and we cannot just sit back and keep complaining about the quality of leadership. They say every country gets the kind of leadership it deserves. All right, tighten your seatbelt, get set. We're taking you on a ride this brand new year, and we'll be beginning the show with 2019 expectations, especially as we count down to the big one in February. Let me introduce my guest to you this morning. I have the Deputy Provost, Nigerian Institute of Journalism, Dr. Jide Johnson. Good morning and Happy New Year to you.
Good morning and Happy New Year to our viewers at home, and Happy New Year to you, Nifemi.
Glad to have you around. Governors and strategy expert is here with us as well, Yemi Makpadero. Compliments of the season.
Same to you. Happy New Year to our viewers.
Glad to have you here. So it's rather a unique experience how we usher in the new year in this part of the world. Unlike in, we've seen pictures from Sydney, from Auckland, London, Washington, D.C. People actually stand by, count down, fireworks, funfair. But in this part of the world, everyone goes to church or mosque before the fireworks begin. They say it matters how you enter the new year. Do you agree?
Well, to a large extent, I agree. Even though I always believe that every new day is just a fresh day. The calendar is a man-made calendar. There is no difference between this Monday and last Monday to me, except that today is, this Tuesday and last Tuesday and next Tuesday. There are 7 days in a week, 5 days to work and the rest of it. But because it's the beginning of a new calendar year, you expect that people will have taken stock, they will have done a review of the activities and appraisal and evaluation. And there are those who will say, okay, I was very strong in this area last year, I need to be stronger and consolidate on that. These are the baggages I carried, in the past year. I need to shed them, and that leads to people talking about resolution. So it's universal, it's global. And with respect to the ushering in of the new year, we are extremely religious, around here. But then I think we're beginning to see some of those celebrative countdowns, to New Year's. We have the Lagos Fiesta, well, we have in Calabar, we have in Port Harcourt. So the culture is catching up. And even in churches, once it's past 12, the fireworks begin. So give and take. I think it's a cultural thing.
Okay. Well, let's just get to business. I don't know if you have a thought or one or two on how religious we are as a nation, and how relevant it is to usher in the day.
Well, all you need to do is just to take a trip across the country, and then you see churches left, right, and center, mosque left, right, and center, and then traditional institution left, right, and center. And if you really want to see it, just go to the political class. They practice these three religions. They are three in one, both the traditional religion, the Christian religion, and the Islamic religion. So religion is a key component part of our lives in Nigeria and in Africa. We are traditional people, and traditional people tends to hold on to religious beliefs, and that's why rather than gather in Abuja Gate or at Tafa Balewa Square or at National Theatre, we rather gather in our respective churches to usher in a new year. And like he said, time is what God has given to everybody. And what we used to in life, what we used to mark time in life it's a calendar.
That's
and
right.
so we mark it based on weeks, based on months, based on days, and based on year for us to plan and project.
Let's begin with Mr. President's statement. We didn't get a speech this year, or like last year, where he took his time to give details about challenges facing the country and what his administration is doing about it. This year, we got a statement via his aide, and naturally, you would expect him to take more time to talk about his achievement in an election year. Would you say Mr. President is playing fair in an election year?
Well, he's an incumbent, so one can say that his work should speak for him. And don't also forget, we are in an election here. Campaigns have started.
That's right.
And they're getting to the peak of the campaign season. So he's going to have a whole lot of opportunities, to talk about the election. I think what suffices, for now, is to just give Nigeria a sense of direction where we're going in 2019, and also to appeal to the people that the election should be made as free and fair and violence-free as possible. And that actually occupied, the statement issued by the SA on media publicity to the president. The president might also be reacting, responding to the opposition spokesman's allegation that his New Year's speech has been loaded with a lot of fake, false promises, accomplishments, and the rest of it. So we might just have decided.
You think they could have dropped that simply because of
like you said, like you said, it's a season of politics.
It's
so
all right.
Intrigues cannot be wished away, even at the highest level.
Let's see how it all plays out. So expectations are high, especially as we count down to the presidential and National Assembly election in less than 2 months. And it's noteworthy what Mr. President said in a statement. As I welcome you into 2019, I also reiterate my many promises and declarations that the general elections will be free, fair, and credible. Elections need not to be do or die affair. It goes on and on like that. There are some who would say that Mr. President himself has been a victim of electoral malpractice in the past years. He's also been a big beneficiary of what we have called free and fair elections, and that much is expected of him in this new year.
It shows how weak our institutions are, because the assurances for a free and fair election shouldn't come from a participant in the process. It should come from the independent National Electoral Commission.
But it's still the president.
I'm going somewhere.
Okay.
I'm just telling you that it shows how weak our institutions are, because such assurances should come in a normal climate. Should come not from a participant. For example, a player cannot guarantee fair play in a game he's going to play a team. Are you with me? Because he's a beneficiary of the process. It's the referee. Because you can't be a judge in your case. But however, it's good that he's giving us that assurance, but it calls for concern that there is a need for us to strengthen institutions to deepen our democracy, because this statement should have come from the chairman, Professor Mahmood, giving us an assurance that this election will be an independent arbiter, will not interfere with the process. It still tells you and I the great power and influence that the presidency wields when it comes to election in Nigeria, and the governors, the executive wields when it comes to the election. And talking about the New Year speech, I think that it's important for you to talk, for you to communicate. You just not but must communicate. In actual sense, this is what came into existence via communication. In the beginning, God said. Now, if you are not saying anything, nobody will know what you are doing. And for you, that's why the leading brand are the major, in quote, noisemaker, if you do your study.
We'll get back to that, but do you agree with him that this kind of statement shouldn't be coming from Mr. President? Even INEC acknowledges the fact that there are several stakeholders in an electoral process. The president, for instance, could give an order to the military, or the security apparatus in an election year is also quite important. How do you, divulge the person of Mr. President, who is also contesting an election, from his office? As the chief, what do they call him?
Security officer.
Chief security officer of the country.
The commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He's the president of Nigeria, so he's wearing two caps. he is a candidate for election, but he also has a responsibility as president and commander-in-chief. I think the president's statement or assurances is not really misplaced. You know, when you look at the environment in which we operate, as alluded to by my colleague here, and when you also recall that several stakeholders, not just in Nigeria, but globally, the EU, you know, the United States, and some other countries, and even the opposition in Nigeria, have constantly put the president, you know, on the back foot, on the need for him to assure and reassure Nigerians that the election will be free, it will be fair, and it will be credible. And so I think I would rather err on the side of caution as president by making those assurances than keep quiet and send the impression that I'm insensitive, you know, to those calls. But by and large, it is the institutions saddled with the conduct of the election, that's the electoral empire, the security operatives, the civil society, and the citizens that, you know, have a greater responsibility.
Do you think that Mr. President carries a moral burden given his antecedents and the way he emerged president to play fair in this exercise?
Certainly. He carries a real moral burden because locally and internationally, the 2015 election where he emerged, you know, as a president, has been regarded as largely, you know, free, fair, credible, and, you know, free of interference, you know, by the sitting president, who was also a candidate. So I think the president has a responsibility to take this a notch higher by ensuring that we institutionalize credible elections in Nigeria.
So they say, Dr. Johnson, that the biggest source of turbulence politically is the fear of rigging and violence. According to a report by the United States Institute of Peace, they interviewed some Nigerians, and their fear is deliberate attempt to frustrate the will of the voters in this year's election. How valid is this fear?
Why do we have to announce the result of the election in the night? We conduct election in the morning by 4 p.m. Are we counting the whole of Nigeria? You ask yourself the question, it takes 3-4 days for you to count. The last election, we had close to about, the president had 15 million, the runner about 12 point something million. President, let me say roughly 35 million votes all across the nation.
It might even take longer this year.
You know how many days it took us for us?
It might even take longer this year, given the huge number of political parties that we have now.
So when anything that is done in the night is shrouded in secrecy. So one of the things we must put in place is for us to quickly get the result of the election. It prevents manipulation, because if you do the election and before night comes, you have announced the result, everybody is aware of the result. When men went to sleep, usually manipulation, you see, the actual result of the election, the main rigging of the election does not take place during the election. It takes place after the election, when tabulation and computation is taking place, when figures, if you add 1 to 100, it becomes 1001, it becomes 11,000. So depending on what you do. So these are real fears. If we really want to, INEC has the resources, has the personnel. And in this age of technology, I think there's a need for us to review the process. That the election result must come out by 7 p.m. If we don't see the result by 7 p.m., we will not.
When Dr. Johnson says night, it makes us feel like we don't have power in Nigeria. It doesn't matter what time the elections are counted, as long as there is enough illumination. But I'm concerned about the Electoral Act, because what he's talking about now is the electronic transmission of results. That did not make it as far as the amendment is concerned, and it's not likely to see the light of the day.
Well,
do you think it's a big concern?
Even I do not think that the Senate or the National Assembly will have the numbers to override the president's veto of that.
They don't even have the time to do that.
And then, well, the time is actually one of the major reasons why the president said he will not accent, to that, because the process for election already started.
That's right.
And so, in order to avoid legal debacle, and confusion. That is his, own argument. Going forward, I think there are a lot of factors that can ensure that we have credible elections, not necessarily the speed with which the results are announced. I know that speed is important, but accuracy is even more important. And I'm aware...
It's important, like they say in the local palace.
Yeah, important. Now, I'm aware that from the polling unit, at the world level, up to the National Collation Center for national elections, there are, documentation of what transpired from at the polling unit. And so everything that happened can actually be tracked and traced. And so, and because of the manual nature of that, of doing that, there is no way that you will expect the result of a federal election, presidential election, under 48 hours. I think we did well the last time in 2015. The election was held on Saturday, and by Tuesday, we already had, the results.
We are even doing way better than some other African countries.
Not just, I was coming to that, not just African countries, not just African countries. You see, those are exceptions anyway. Even in the United States, the last midterm election, you had to resort to manual counting,
recounting,
recounting, which had to be done manually, in Florida and in one or two other places. So, if it were, a presidential election, right, what that means is that outstanding result is capable of delaying the announcement of the entire result. I think what is more important really is to ensure that the processes are credible and that the political actors are also vigilant. And that is why at every point they have agents and representatives to ensure that the right things are done. But if they go to sleep, of course, manipulations can take place. I think what Dr. Johnson was making reference to was just in a metaphorical sense. Manipulation can take place at any point in time. And I don't want us to also be too obsessed, with the issue of electronic transmission, because there is nothing that is foolproof. In actual fact, people will tell you that it's even easier to hack into a system now than it is to access a physical form, for instance, or document and alter it.
It's all right. Let's take this conversation further. INEC appears to be, coming up with ideas on how to curb vote buying in subsequent elections. In Osun, for instance, we saw how it rearranged its voting cubicle such that it is not open to an outsider. Who you're voting for. You are not allowed to come into that cubicle with your phone. We're also told recently that the the ballot paper in 2019 is going to be rolled such that it would not be obvious at all. But would you say that all of these, are you optimistic that INEC will be able to defeat vote buying in February?
Vote buying. You remember the reason why the 1991 presidential primaries, I wish you should go. We can read Babangida's speech in cancelling the presidential primaries in SDP and NLC then, where 21 candidates were banned from contesting election. It was on vote buying. As long as you have human beings, as long as you perpetuate poverty, as long as the economic situation of the country is not improved, as long as there is no adequate voters' education, vote buying will still be a company. There is nothing INEC can do, and there is nothing anybody can do with respect to vote buying.
But when you say voters' education, I'm concerned because we seem to have been singing the eves of vote buying for ages now.
Where is National Orientation Agency? I'm asking you. Where's National Orientation Agency? You recall during Babangida's administration, you had MAMSA, Mass Mobilization for Socio-Economic Recovery, and headed by Professor Jerry Garnett then. In terms of, I'm asking, where's, we have an agency which is called National Orientation Agency. Do you know whether that agency is still in existence? As a little bit enlightened as I am, I don't even know the national head, or do I even know the head of Lagos State's own, basically. So these are areas in which because you need to encourage, to educate the citizenry as to the side effect of selling your vote. selling your vote is like selling your birthright, because your vote is your birthright. It's your destiny. That's why it's called mandate. Now, the word mandate is a combination of two words, man and date. That's your date with destiny. That's when you surrender your right, every right that you have. That for me to go through good routes, for my children to go to good schools, for me to have better health care and everything, I am giving that's why I use your thumbprint. They can forge your signature, but your thumbprint can never be forged. That's why I use your thumbprint. You are signing a social contract, like Busu said, that I am giving that right to you. For the next 4 years, you take care of all of these things on my behalf. That's the beauty of democracy. That's the essence of going to vote on the election. But when people are not conscious, when they are not knowledgeable about the process, they can sell it for a morsel of bread. Even Esau sold his own when he was hungry. An hungry man can sell anything.
Mr. Makpadero, are you also pessimistic that INEC's novel ideas are it going to work as regards vote buying in 2019?
Well, to some extent, some of the steps taken by INEC really has enhanced the credibility of the electoral process and has more or less, banished open vote buying. And so people now deploy so many other means, to buy vote. You see, why I'm not going to take the issue of vote buying in isolation is because I see it as a reflection of our warped values. It's not only votes that we sell in Nigeria, and those who don't even have any reason to sell their votes, for a morsel, still do it because they are used to it. It's like saying somebody will stop stealing the moment you give him more money. It's not true. It will only end up stealing more. We sell everything. When we perform our obligations, we expect to get extra, gratification for it. When whatever we do, we think we should, get something out of it. When I give you the right of way in traffic, I expect that you will wave me to say thank you, even though I've just done, the right thing. So it's a values problem. And that brings me to
a value problem that cannot be solved before February.
So it can be solved before February, but with respect to minimizing it, yes, I think there is an extent to which the sheer openness and bravado with which it used to be done may not be witnessed, but that it won't happen. It will happen before and during the election proper.
Well, let's see how it goes. INEC thinks otherwise, but we can only report it when it actually happens. In 2015, we experienced an amazing level of sportsmanship on behalf of the incumbent president, who immediately after, even while the results were being announced, put a call through to the General Muhammadu Buhari, who was contesting on the platform of the APC, to congratulate him. Do you expect to see such spirit of sportsmanship aftermath of this election?
Well, Payami did that when he lost to Fauci in 14. Pull a call through to him. And I think we need that element of sportsmanship in our election.
Even though I think eventually they went to court?
No, it didn't go. Fayemi didn't go to court in 14. Fayemi didn't go to court in 14. Fayemi did not go to court in 14. So same with Jonathan in 15. I think we need that for us to understand when the election is, and it goes back to the umpire, when the election is transparent, when it is open, you will see the measure of independence that Professor Jega exhibited, despite pressure from the executive, despite the antics of the rubies of this world. Are you with me? You could imagine the kind of pressure that could have been exerted. You could imagine the kind of phone calls he would have received during that collation. And we need that. And that's a call to the present INEC chairman, that if you run a transparent, if you run an open, it's there for the whole world to see that what you are doing is clear, is plain, it's transparent. The result, nobody can challenge the result. If that goes to equity, comes with what? Clean hands. So if the process is open, is transparent, nobody can challenge it. No power can fault what is right. What is right is right. So once that is in place, and you could also recall from 2015 that the issue of card reader or no card reader was not in the Electoral Act. The INEC chairman, in his own wisdom, using the instrumentality of his office and the power given to him, explore the opportunities of where it works, where it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so this present INEC chairman can deploy electronic tabulation if he wants or not, because the instrumentality of his office gives him power to take decisions on anything covering the election. Take, for example, the issue of ordering of the election. The ordering of the election is not written in any way in the law. When he ordered the election and the National Assembly challenged it, they said you should go to court. That's the power, and that talks about how strong institutions are.
Interestingly, in this part of the world, we go to court almost after every election. So the former president could have decided to challenge that election, no matter how, perceived, no matter how free and fair it was perceived to be. He could have challenged the use of cards. Remember that while he was voting in Otokwe that year, the card could not read his fingerprint. Yeah. In his book, My Transition Hours, he chronicled what precisely happened. He had his cabinet members in a sitting room deliberating on what to do next. And he, by himself made up his mind to go into his room and put a call through to his opponent. There are people who would say that when it comes to sportsmanship, it boils down to the personality of the candidate, whether he or she is ready to concede defeat at that particular time.
Well, for me, the singular act of former President Jonathan to congratulate then candidate Buhari, while the results of the election were still being announced, will forever define him. Irrespective of whatever garbage anybody throws at him, that singular act is sufficient to neutralize all. And today is benefiting, from that. And that is a lesson also to the rest of us, that when history beckons, we must not fail, to leverage it, to make use of those kind of opportunities, to put our footprint, in the sand of time. Having said that, I also think that by virtue of the development in technology and by virtue of the transparency that has been introduced into our electoral process, many a times before the results are officially announced, in fact, hours before results are officially announced, we already know who the winners are. But because every form must be properly filled,
that's right.
Every signature must be properly appended, all things have to be done according to the bureaucracy of election. That is what delays, the eventual announcement. So unless in situations where candidates are running neck and neck, where, result from a particular polling unit could tilt, the result, like we saw in the Osun Guba polls. Most of the elections in Nigeria since 2015, people already know who the winners are, even before the results are announced by the electoral umpire. And so I think to that extent, litigations arising from elections should necessarily, begin to dim in terms of sheer numbers. But like you said, I also know that politicians are incurable optimists. They think that based on one technicality or the other, they could still make, the results not to count whenever they lose. And that is why after exhausting the electoral petition procedure, they now go back to election matters, that's right, like primaries. That's right. This person didn't have certificate and so on and so forth. You're just throwing everything.
As we speak right now, the Osun and Ekiti election held earlier in the year are currently contested in courts. We have staggered elections here and there as a result of elections being won at the court. We have to take a break now. When we return, we'll talk about the issue of governance in an election year and also touch on security. Stay with us. It's decision year 2019. Congratulations, you made it, and we really appreciate you for joining us on the show. We're talking about expectations for the new year. Dr. Jide Johnson is here, as well as Mr. Yemi Makmadarian. Gentlemen, thank you for staying the course on the show this morning.
It was a pleasure.
So the perception is that in election year, governance is grounded, and then the politicians are mainly focused on electioneering. Last year, it took the National Assembly 7 months, to
Pass the budget.
And of course, when it eventually sent it to Mr. President in May, it didn't sign it into law until, I think, the ending of June, thereabout. There are also, perceptions. I mean, there are already talks about the future. What do they say? How do you call it? The destiny of the current 2019 appropriation bill. Already, the Senate President has called it hopeless. No. Are you optimistic that this document will be passed before May 29?
No. Now, let me tell you this. I've advocated this, that we should make our financial year May 29, and we should make it May 29, jettison this January to December financial year, because May 29 is usually when we usher in new government. Let me use state government, for example. There are states in which the governors have spent 2 terms. They will be going. Another governor will come in May, and he has already passed 2019 budget. By the time the new governor comes in, he will pass in supplementary budget. There's no doubt that if you have this electoral cycle and you have this budgetary cycle tying together, inconsistent, at variance with one another, definitely budget will suffer. And if you look at the history of budgets in Nigeria, from 1999 to date, we have always had crises. And unfortunately, until recently, it is the party that controls the executive, that controls the legislature. But they have always worked at cross purposes, and I've advocated this, that there is a need for us to match these two cycles. This budget, with the kind of high-wire politicking going on for 2019, where the headship of the National Assembly are in opposition to the headship of the executive, and there's a love-lost relationship between the two of them, definitely governance will suffer. I don't see where they are going to sit. Now, we have the presidential election February 16 and the National Assembly election February 16. Then 2 weeks after, we have the governorship and the rest of it. That means that between now and March, there might not be, because it's campaigning that we're going on.
It's all right.
Let me take it even to the presidency now. If you look at the composition of the presidential campaign committee, virtually all the ministers are in Fashola is there, Dambanza
Let me hold you for a minute. Let's take this conversation to Abia State. Okorafo is standing by. Happy New Year, Okorafo.
Mazi.
Hello, Mazi. Are you there? Okay, I think we just have to...
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
I wish you the same. Please go ahead.
Good morning, our Deputy Provost and the rest.
Good morning, Mazi.
Today, the world expects dividends of the democracy for all Nigerians, rich or poor. To achieve this, we need the spirit of simplicity, purity, have faith in God, and love one another. Now, today we are talking about state of origin. State of origin is anything we do. Can we achieve that? We expect credible election, transparent, and I want to ask our Deputy Provost, sir, you are in charge of education, at least you know what's happening. You have seen that presently the budget, the estimate we have seen on the paper and on the screen. Do you think this issue of strike by the ASU, do they have such provision of settling that what the ASU are demanding? Because the situation whereby we neglect education, it really means we're increasing the rate of armed robbery, kidnapping, name them. And we know as an authority in the there, you know that education helps to eradicate all these problems that we encounter in this country. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to all of you in the studio.
Glad to hear from you, Okorafo. Happy New Year to you. We'll get to the strike if we can in due time. But the Senate President is wearing 2 caps. On one hand, he is the Senate President. On the other hand, he's the Director General of the PDP. In that capacity, he called that document hopeless. Is that spelling doom for the 2019 budget proposal?
It does. A day before he made that pronouncement, I was on this program, and I expressed optimism that the 2019 appropriation bill can be passed, before May 29. But when I saw the statement of the Senate President, which he reiterated, I think yesterday or 2 days back, I felt concerned that there was no way he was going to divulge himself as the Senate President, from what he said as a DG of the presidential candidate. And so, in a way, one could say that practically, spells doom.
That's right.
for the budget. However, this is Nigeria. I am still hopeful that the members of the National Assembly will understand that they have a date with destiny and that there should be a limit, to politicking. I think that a budget can be passed in 3 months.
It's all right. Let's take this call from Awogbemi. Awogbemi is calling us from the United Kingdom. Happy New Year to you, Awogbemi.
Yeah, good morning, Nifemi and the two gentlemen from the studio. Nifemi, I heard what the other guy was saying. The level of poverty in Nigeria and the ignorance of the people by selling their phone. The other guy on the other side has said it. That's nothing someone can do when the level of poverty are too poor. As you understand, by now, Nigeria should know what we are going to look at. President Buhari regime and the former one he has done. He has not done anything that's giving us the profit of democracy. And yet, if people are ignorant of what they are selling, how do they want to know? How do they want to know what to do? What we are saying now, they should give them orientation that they should not sell their phone. They should give them enlightenment. When you are selling your phone, you are selling your birthright because of the level of poverty. Look at what is going on in Nigeria. It's a change. We have no electricity. We have no security too much in Savannah State, in Port Harcourt, a lot of problems everywhere in Nigeria. How long? How long? People in abroad are even struggling. They wanted to come home, but where did we wanted to start from? Like now, if I wanted to decide to settle in Nigeria, where is the electricity? Where is the security? Where is the other thing? Why? Because level of poverty has been much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, maybe you have to come home first to find out that electricity is getting better in some areas and all of that. Okay, I'm sure he's a Londoner, that's why he's calling you guys and all of that. All right, so let's turn our attention to ongoing strikes, right? Okorafor mentioned ASU strike. On the front page of the New Telegraph this morning, prepare for prolonged strike, NLC tells Nigerians. Governors are saying 30,000 minimum wage demand is unrealistic. As a matter of fact, they're saying that we're making concerted efforts to improve education, health, infrastructure, and that we're not going to spend more than 50% of our budget on salaries and all of that. How do you see all of this play out in the new year?
It's about engagement. It's about serious engagement. One of the challenges of governance in Nigeria is that people that are elected and those that are appointed into public offices usually ascribe the Lord and Master role to themselves. They forget that they are part and parcel of the people. You engage the labor with facts, with figures. You engage. You see, as some states are complaining that they can't pay, they are doing recruitment secretly, political recruitment, employing their family members into the civil service, having over-bloated civil service structure. It's about government engaging with hustle, government engaging with labor. This is the budget. In the last 10 years, it's only a fool that argues with proofs. And it's pure madness for you not to go to the negotiating table with facts. 10 years figure. In the last 10 years, this is what this state has generated. In the last 10 years, this is the number of workforce we have had. In the last 10 years, this is what we have paid as emolument. Now, 10 years from now, this is the progression. If we pay 30,000, in the next 10 years, this is what the wage bill will look
Pardon
like.
me, let me hold you to take this call from Nasarawa State. Good morning, Aki. Aki, are you there?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Go ahead with your
Hello?
contribution.
Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly we can.
Hello?
Aki, we can hear you. Go ahead with your contribution.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think Nigerian will have responsibility to ensure next year election is free and fair.
This year, we are already in
should
2019. What
cooperate
part of the
with INEC.
world are you calling from?
We should not preempt the fact that INEC will not do well.
It's all right.
The next INEC chairman will take it from where Jega stopped. And Nigerians should ensure that we comport ourselves. The politicians should be advised to comport themselves. In most cases, it's the politician that connive to rig election. Most times, it's not the umpire. So for me, it is the responsibility of us to ensure that because the moment you are threatening the person that the INEC will not be fair, then we are not fair on INEC. And on the issue of minimum wage, Nigerian government should be encouraged to pay Nigerian workers the wages they deserve. If an African governor can pay himself millions of naira, drive on comfort of circle, and that governor say he cannot pay 30,000 naira to a Nigerian worker, it is not fair. Good
That's all
morning and God bless Nigeria.
Thank you very much. I think it's that time of the year where you still mistakenly call 2019, 2018 and all of that. It's acceptable. Now, the government appears to have a lot on its plate. ASU is on strike, ASUP is on strike, NLC is threatening, to bring down fire and all of that. Do you think that government is going to have to pay attention to these demands because of election, or they're just going to look the other side and feel that they can still win elections irrespective of all of these civil protests and all of that?
No, I think it would be insensitive and irresponsible of any government to ignore the calls, justifiable calls for, a review of minimum wage, which machinery has been set in motion and which the tripartite committee set up already submitted, a report based on discussions and to some extent agreement with governments at both the federal and state level. So I imagine that the willingness to ensure that we have a new minimum wage is there. And I think the president mentioned that during his budget submission to the National Assembly, that was going to set a bill with regard to that. But I expected that that bill ought to have even predated, the 2019 appropriation
budget proposal.
because
Because
Labour already
apparently
gave,
that money is not
yeah, because the
in this budget.
concern really, you see, we are looking at the 30,000 as a baseline. But the implication really for government at all levels is that they're possibly going to have their wage bills exponentially increased.
Let me hold you
by as
for
much
a
as
minute.
100%.
Let's take this conversation to Mina. Aliyu is calling from Mina, Niger State. Good morning, Aliyu. Aliyu, are you there?
Hello, I am here. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, the guest. I want to contribute on virtually all the issues, more especially the issue of election. You see, when INEC introduces card reader, although thank you to the guests that have raised the issue there, when INEC introduces the card reader, there is no any law backing card reader, but there is no any law that said INEC should not do its business in any way and anyhow they can present Nigerians free and fair election. So long as they will deliver free and fair election, INEC has the power to introduce whatever it can to ease its responsibility towards achieving that very free and fair election. Then if INEC should introduce electronic transmission of results, what will dispute that? By the way, INEC can even checkmate the analog process by using the electronic transmission. That way we can check the politicians and anybody who is trying to tamper with election results. And concerning the budget, it's very clear budget and salaries of workers and whatever we are facing. Nigerians want good governance. But I am sorry, Nigerians are sending caricature honorables to political positions. How are we going to reconcile that? We want budget to be perfect. We want the National Assembly to listen to us. Yet we are sending people that will not listen to us. We want governors. And you are a civil servant. You want a better governor who is going to pay salaries for you. Why don't you vote for a governor that will provide revenue for your state? We are sending people based on political acronyms. Let us look at people that will serve us. Else we are nowhere. That is the Balatan truth. If we are ready to transform this nation, we must stop voting for caricature honorables to political positions. Thank you very much.
A very precise contribution there. I hope that electorates are listening and they can identify properly who they voted for in the new year. Gentlemen, let's talk security because of our time. Already, the Nigerian Army is to kickstart Operation Python Dance in 6 geopolitical zones. We saw it in 2016 and 2017 in state and southeast Nigeria. Initially, it was praised for, some very lofty ideas the military was bringing to the table. There was medical outreach on one hand, road rehabilitation, but it deteriorated when Biafra proponents weren't just getting it at all. I mean, they had enough of what they call harassment of their members, and it deteriorated to even at that time was when Nnamdi Kanu escaped, and until we saw him recently in Israel. How relevant would you say this operation is in an election year?
One of the things that I think that we should have outgrown is the militarization of our democratic process after spending almost 20 years of democratic experience. And when we do election in Nigeria, it's like a lockdown, it's like a siege. And if you are within my generation, it's like the normal morning, the night before and the morning after a coup d'etat, if you understand what I'm saying, where people cannot even move freely. It's only in Africa and in Nigeria that you have election like that people cannot move. I think policing should be left for the police. Policing of the state should be left for the police. The militaries are meant to be in the barracks, and when there are critical situations, that's when the military should come in. Even the sight of a military person, fully dressed in his fully gear, can intimidate a voter. It might even be ascribed to the low voters turnout that we have. Because an average person in the rural area might have not seen the military person before in his life, and all of a sudden he's just coming and seeing the military. I think there's that aspect, we need to reform that aspect, the militarization of our democratic process. There's no need for Python dance all over Nigeria. In actual sense, pythons don't dance, they swallow people.
Let me take Mohammed's call from Katangura. I believe Katangura is in Niger State. Good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning. How are you, Lieutenant?
Terrific. Happy New Year to you.
Can you hear me, Lieutenant?
Very clearly, we can hear you here.
Yes. Good morning to my guests, your guests there, and Happy New Year to all Nigerians and you people in the studio.
Good morning. Good morning.
You see, mine is on you people, journalists, and the channels, or how would I call it, all the television stations. When it comes to programs like this, your invited guests, please, let there be neutrality. We know we are all human beings. And we are speaking to uncountable numbers of human beings on earth. Because it's only God that knows how many people that are listening to your channel at present. What I want to say is this. Issues of Nigeria, that when you invite your guests to the studio, I believe we are human beings. There is no how you will have a particular candidate, nation or country or idea before coming there. But please, let's pick Nigeria. Let's talk Nigeria. Let's see how Nigerians will come out of this quagmire. Let's see how an ordinary Nigeria, who is in a typical village, that doesn't have television, that doesn't have phone, is using, as you can see, the last 2006 the national population census. The Chinese, the EU came here with phones. If you have television, if you have this, they did that in the name to get either, if they knew in 30 years you cannot meet up with our electricity needs. So
It's
they
all right.
came up with different touchlights, selling it at this sum you buy it today, tomorrow it's for.
I think that's how much time we can take from your side, Niger. I really cannot understand. We're not talking Ethiopia here. We're talking Nigeria as well. But I think that perhaps would make sense of that subsequently. So my personal fear, with the python dance, Dr. Johnson said pythons don't dance. Well, maybe there are new species of pythons you don't know about. But then, what happens to the renewed insurgency in the northeast? There is armed banditry in Zamfara. We just reported, cases of Boko Haram attacks in Yobe, in Borno, and all of that. Shouldn't the military, just put all of their attention, as regards this, especially when it has even become a threat to the forthcoming election?
No, it doesn't work that way. I agree 100% that the military should be confined to the fringes with regards to election. But military exercises are routine things that take place all the time, everywhere in the world. But again, the way we manage things in Nigeria, calls to question the motivation, behind some of the actions that we take, and then the reasons we impute into steps being taken by institutions, because over time, our institutions have lost touch with Nigerians, and Nigerians don't trust them. So we tend to impute meanings into all the things they do, especially when they don't show enough conviction and proper timing of events. Ordinarily, the military should be at alert at all times. It doesn't. In fact, it is at peacetime that you pay a lot of attention on issues of security, not when the crisis already.
But should they be practically involved in keeping peace within the local communities? One would have thought that should primarily be the role of the police.
Well, it's primarily the role of the police, and those who also created that role for the police also said that the military can be drafted in to assist civil authority when the need arises. The question is, who determines when the need arises?
The opposition is saying that this exercise is going to last through, the election period, and they're already making an issue out of it. Intimidation of voters, fears, there'll be roadblocks and all of that. How relevant do you think that is?
One of the campaign reforms I've advocated for is for us to have absentee ballots. You know that people on essential duties don't have a stake in this democracy. The military, they don't vote. The police, they don't vote. Now, if you vote in the election, you protect that election. If you vote before the election and you have interest in a particular candidate, you'll be interested in protecting the process.
You want the military and the police to vote?
People that have been ostracized, those that have been disenfranchised from the process, the military and the police.
It's all right.
And people in critical sector like you and I that will come to report. So we need to do that.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on the program. Deputy Provost, Nigerian Institute of Journalism, Dr. Jide Johnson.
Happy New Year, and it's going to be a wonderful year for all Nigerians.
Amen. Mr. Yemi Makpadero's governance and strategy expert. It's good to have you on the show always.
My pleasure. Let's all be part of the solution.
Thank you so very much, very kindly, viewers. Thank you for 2018. Let's do it again in the new year. So I've been reading quite a number of New Year messages, and one stood out for me, and it's from the Nasarawa State Governor, Umaru Tanko Almakura. I'm quoting him now. Make 2019 a year of love for the country, and place Nigeria first in everything you do and say in 2019. We'll be back again tomorrow, God willing, with another exciting one. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Happy New Year.